Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience.
Hello, welcome back to Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. Make sure if you haven't already to click the subscribe button and become a part of the Big LEZ'S League community. Going to be talking about a few things today. Obviously, we'll quickly touch on the Kyle Flanagan and Stephen Crichton incident. We're going to go straight into the Catalans crew. Who's the Catalans crew? You might have seen them on the thumbnail for the YouTube video when you clicked on it, but we'll go through that in a second. We're going to talk about this Gutho debate. Obviously, put a post up about it at the start of this previous round. But we'll sort of have a little bit of a chat about it, and then obviously going into some Eels chat. We sort of started the conversation in the last video, but I thought it'd be a good idea, or at least beneficial, to go through a little bit more details that have come to light in the past 24 to 48 hours, and just some stuff that was obviously not the best for the Eels in this scenario. We're going to be specifically talking about Moses and Dylan Brown, the two halves for the Parramatta Eels, and their contract clauses. We'll start off with the Flanagan and Stephen Crichton chat. Obviously, as I said, we'll just touch on it. It's pretty rogue. Obviously, we don't have too many of these scenarios. The last time there was an incident of biting, I believe, with Shaun Johnson and Kevin Proctor, unto which Kevin Proctor, I believe, got a bit of time on the sidelines. You'd imagine that Kyle Flanagan would be getting the same. He's been referred straight to the judiciary. The difference between those two scenarios, again, though, is that Shaun Johnson went to the referee and reported it straight away, whereas Stephen Crichton, he just got on with the rest of the game, which just shows a lot of, I wouldn't say resilience, but I'd say a lot of just shows the type of person that Stephen Crichton is. And it was just great to see that just sort of composure. Obviously, it is hectic. It's unexpected. Obviously, you're not going into playing a game of rugby league and expecting to get bitten in the face. But obviously, he just kept his calm, kept composed, played out the rest of the game for his teammates. And then after the game, still felt strongly enough to go up to the referee and report the scenario. I think that it is, as I said, pretty rogue. As I said, you don't really see too many of these instances. Kyle Flanagan is pretty adamant that he didn't bite Stephen Crichton, and obviously he told that to his father. We got the quote from Shane Flanagan as well. But you look at the video evidence, and it does look quite damning. It does look like there was a little bit of a bite there. I'm not going to go and try and get sued for defamation here at all, but the video evidence, it does seem like there was a little bit of a bite there, so you would expect to see Kyle Flanagan potentially sit on the sidelines for the next few weeks. I'm hearing 6 to 8 weeks. I think that's sort of the bracket we're looking for. Wouldn't be surprised if it's less. I think it'd be hectic if it was more. I don't think that they have that many games left in the season anyway. So if it is that 8 weeks, and the St. George Illawarra Dragons, they somehow slip out of the top 8, you could expect them to obviously lose him for the rest of the year, and then a little bit of next year as well, which could be really damning for them in this finals run. But even if they do make finals, if it is the 8-week suspension, it's pretty much going all the way through finals anyway. So best case scenario, it's about 4 to 6. But even then, as I said, you're probably looking at him sitting on the sidelines for the rest of the year. Who comes in for Kyle Flanagan if he does get suspended? Well, obviously Jack Bird has just come back into the fold. He's been playing reserve grade for the past few weeks, whether it be fullback or in the centres. He's come in and played in the halves before, obviously when they had Anthony Griffin there, and they were sort of trying to decide who were the halves going into the future for the club alongside Ben Hunt. Obviously, Jack Bird was one of the guys that filled in that number 6 role for a few weeks, and I thought did quite well. Wouldn't shock me if he does come into that role, play a bit more of a running type 6 sort of role. He has put on a little bit of size since coming back from injury as well, just watching a few clips of him in reserve grade. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there with Bird. Wouldn't shock me if he goes into the back row or something like that, or just comes off the bench as a 14, a big lock forward with a good ball playing ability, that sort of role there off the bench. But other guys, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, they've got Jesse Marshke there as well. They can go into that number 6 role. That's really about it. There was rumours they were going to get Sean O'Sullivan earlier in the year. It doesn't look like that's come to be. It looks like Marshke will be staying put in St. George, and obviously Sean O'Sullivan will be staying put at the Dolphins. He's a bit of a cult hero up there at the moment after the field goal on the weekend. But yeah, they don't really have too many options in the halves, and that was a big issue for them, obviously at the start of the season as well, when obviously Junior Ramon got sat out for a long period now. Obviously, it doesn't look like he'll be coming back anytime soon either. Obviously, they don't have too many stocks in the halves. It was a big issue at the start of the year when they were trying to figure out who this half was going to be. Kyle Flanagan comes in, does that role well. But yeah, look, I think having Kyle Flanagan out, just looking at what he does for Ben Hunt, just playing that simple role, letting Ben Hunt run the side. He just complements Hunt and does what Hunt needs him to do. I think that they're going to miss that. The genuine half that's in there with Ben Hunt that recognizes what Ben Hunt needs and does that to a T. Doesn't have the best stats, but he does what his team needs him to do. He plays his role. And I think they're going to miss that in that number 6 jersey if Kyle Flanagan does end up missing time for this spot. As I said, he has been ruled straight to the judiciary, so we'll have to wait and see over the coming hours what happens there with Kyle Flanagan. The next little thing that we're going to be talking about, obviously, is the Catalans crew. Tevita Pangai Jr. reportedly signed there. I'll have to double check on here if it's been confirmed yet, but Tevita Pangai Jr., it sounds like that deal's done for him to go to the Catalans for next year on a 1-year deal. Remus Smith, he signed up there as well. So you got a little crew up there, along with Jared Warrior-Hargreaves, who signed there going into next year. You've obviously got Luke Keary going there as well. They get some young, good players over there in the Super League. They have got an absolute force going into 2025. It's going to be a scary little matchup. Imagine Luke Keary, Remus Smith, Jared Warrior-Hargreaves, Tevita Pangai Jr., just Jared and Tevita Pangai Jr. starting in the front row together. That's absolutely insane. I tell you what, there's going to be a few suspensions up in the Super League between them, to be honest. We saw what happened to Dylan Napa when he went over to the Super League, got suspended in his first game for a coat hanger, was out for 4 to 8 weeks, I believe. So, look, hopefully that doesn't happen to them over in the Super League, but I think they are going to be a real force. And I think that the Catalans Dragons, with all of those guys going over there, not sure what the cap's looking like for Catalans at the moment or how many other troops they have that are ex-footballers at the moment. Obviously, they just let go of Jaden Nikorima, I believe, who's already secured a deal with the Huddersfield Giants, I believe he's playing with now over there in the Super League. COCY Takiaho, I believe he's still trying to come back to the NRL, trying to get a deal with the Dogs still. I believe he's in talk. He's trying to get an exemption to come over and play. Obviously, he didn't complete the medical test the first time he tried to go to the Bulldogs, so he has to, I think, come back and do that again. I'm not sure about the finer details of that one, but obviously, I think he's trying to get an exemption to come back and play for the Dogs, which would be great to see. Obviously, they're looking at Corey Horsburgh, which, you know what, we'll talk about that as well, actually, because that's pretty big. We'll talk about that at the end. But that's why he just come up on the phone then. But, yeah, look, I mean, you know, what happens with COCY Takiaho if he does end up maybe getting a second chance over there at Catalans or something like that. But getting these guys in return, Jared Tevita Pangai Jr., which was the point I was going to make after that long rant. And then you add Luke Keary, who is a very experienced half in the NRL, along with Remus Smith, who at his best can be quite good there in the back line, just with his injury run. Hopefully he has a good run up there in England. They can have a really sick team and one that will be challenging for a premiership over there, I believe. Not too certain on what the other teams are looking like. Obviously, you've got Matt Duffy killing it over there for the Leeds Rhinos. You've obviously got a few other guys Warrington Wolves. Matt Duffy's playing for Warrington Wolves. But you got some forces over there in the Super League, and I think adding these sort of guys into the competition for Catalans, it is going to be very interesting to see how these ex-NRL players go. Obviously, you got Brodie Croft over there at the Giants, I believe, as well. So, yeah, you got some really good ex-NRL players over there doing some great jobs over there, and then you're adding all of these guys in. You're going to really upgrade the quality of the final series there for the Super League, and I think that this Catalans Dragons team with all of these guys going over, as I said, it is going to be a real force. Let's talk about the next thing. Obviously, the Gutho debate. Where should he play next season? I think that, and I know a lot of people have said it in the comment section below as well of that post that I put out on Thursday or Friday. I think that he has to be the fullback. You just look at all of the things that he does for your footy side at fullback. He's so clutch every single week, just making those little plays and making those decisions there in defence that end up paying dividends for his side. Obviously, the clutch tackle, the clutch play, scoring 2 tries at the death against Penrith to try and pull his side back into the game. Unfortunately, defensively on their edges, they just couldn't hold on to what Penrith were throwing at them. And Nathan Cleary went to another level as well by the back end of that game. But you can't blame that loss on Clint Gutherson. Clint Gutherson pretty much pulled them to a very close win against the Penrith Panthers. and obviously has been a big reason as to their form and their current streak at the moment and what they're doing in the competition now towards the back end of the season. Gutho, Brownie, big parts of that. And I think that Gutho needs to remain at fullback just for that reason. He can make the clutch play, and the effort areas that he puts in, week out, he is just such a gun. And I think that if you were to add, the speed and the X factor of Tedesco's, Pappenhausen's, Ponga's, Walsh's into a guy like Clint Gutherson, you're looking at the best player in rugby league or the best fullback in the competition if you were to add all of those other, layers to Clint Gutherson's game, like the footwork of Reece Walsh or Kalen Ponga, the speed off the mark of Reece Walsh, the way that Tedesco moves. You would add all of these little factors and layers into Gutho's game, he'd easily be the best player in the competition because you're adding all of those real good talent areas to a really, a guy that puts in 110% every single game. The effort's there. And while he doesn't have the X factor and the stuff like that other fullbacks have. And, while he isn't a Reece Walsh, while he isn't a Callum Ponga, while he isn't a James Tedesco, a Dylan Edwards, a Tom Trbojevic, these sort of cats, he is just effort on effort. And that's why I think he's still one of the top 5 fullbacks in the competition currently, 100%, just with the effort that he puts in, the clutch plays that he does as well. Definitely one of the top 5 fullbacks in the competition for me, bar none. So Gutho for me, he's got to remain at fullback. There's a lot of chat, obviously, that he should move into the centres. If Blaze Solangi was staying at the club, sure, I think that move makes sense because Blaze Solangi is the future fullback and Gutho would be making his way into the centres. He can still do a lot from centre, but I feel like if you were to move him without Blaze Solangi going there, what's the point? Who goes to fullback, by the way? I know that Sean Russell's usually a fullback, but he hasn't played fullback in a while. He's been playing first grade wing and centre. Moving him back to fullback, unless he has a full preseason there. I just don't think it's worth it. I think Gutho is a better fullback, to be honest, from what I've seen from both of these guys. Obviously there's not too many other guys that can come in and fill in that fullback role. I think that Blaze Solangi, as I said, would have been the future. So he would have been the best option there at fullback if Gutho was to move to centre. And plus, if Gutho moves to centre, they chuck someone else at fullback, and Blaze Solangi is obviously not there. Who's going to make those clutch plays there at fullback? You're not going to get what you usually get from Gutho because it won't be able to roam around the field and do what he does. Go both sides of the ruck and create, really solid plays like he does there at fullback. He's so good when he moves. You're just not getting what you would have gotten from him at fullback if you do move him into the centres. You're sort of like limiting what he can do on the football field if you move him into the centres as well. So with Blaze Talangi moving out of the side, I don't think it makes sense to move Gutho. I think you got to keep him at fullback until you find another Blaze Talangi, which I think is going to be very, very difficult for the Eels. We'll talk a bit about the Eels as well. Just some chat around the Eels, obviously. There's been a bit of chat, and I've got an article up here just about the contracts of Moses and of Dylan Brown. It says here, as if throwing away a victory against the Western Sydney rivals, Penrith wasn't bad enough. Parramatta continued to deal with the speculation over Mitchell Moses' future. The halfback has 2 years to run on his deal, but escape clauses in his contract allow him to look around should he be looking for a change of scenery. 5'8" Dylan Brown has similar clauses allowing him to stay at the Eels until 2031 if he decides to trigger them. Former South Sydney coach Jason Demetrio argues clauses are great for players, but not clubs. He said, "I just don't get clauses. I could never get my head around them and never entertain them as a coach at any level and would never entertain them." That was Jason Demetrio. And I think that makes sense. Obviously, I honestly agree with that statement. It's better for the players than it is for the clubs. It's great for a player because obviously they can obviously have a bit of power as to where they want to go, what they want to do. But as a club, say you're the Gold Coast Titans and AJ Brimson signs on this 10-year deal like he has, right? He signed on this 10-year deal, and obviously he's going to be the future of your club at fullback. Say that Keanu Kinney and Jaden Campbell are elsewhere. Say that they're not at the Titans. AJ Brimson is pretty much your only fullback in the club, right? Let's just go down that sort of road. 5 years in, the club's not going too well. You're very close to the spoon every single year. And AJ, he's had enough. He has a clause now in his contract at the halfway point where he can just get out and go. Instead of building, and you've built the rest of the club around AJ, you've signed guys around AJ, stuff like that, right? And AJ goes, "Nah, I've had enough," and he doesn't use the clause and he gets out of there and he goes to the Parramatta Eels or something like that, right? How bad would it be as a club if you're in this struggling period for 5 years and your best player that you've built your team around decides, nah, I've had enough. We're not winning games where, like in Mitchell Moses' case, my coach is gone. He's been sacked by the club. I'm not agreeing with the decisions from the higher ups. I've had enough. I'm out. The whole club, you've built this one player around and the player decides to leave. That puts the club in a really bad position. And now they have to go out and look for another marquee guy, which they might not even be able to find because most marquee guys are, signed with other clubs and they've got to, pretty much start again. It puts them in a bit of a 3 to 4 year rebuild period if they have to go out and look for another rookie to build a team around as well. It just puts them in a really shit spot. And that's why I think that it just hurts clubs when you've got these clauses in for such star players. If a player signs this 10-year contract, personally, I think that 10 years is a bit much, like for full contracts. But if they sign a 10-year contract, they should fulfill the 10-year contract. And if you don't want to be staying around at a club for 10 years or be locked in for 10 years, don't sign a 10-year deal. Sign a 5-year deal. Sign a 3-year deal. If you really want to just see how you feel after the first year, just sign a 1-year deal. But have that as the ploy rather than signing a 10-year deal with multiple clauses in there where the player can just go, nope, I've had enough, I'm fucking off. That's what I think hurts clubs, and I think it's going to hurt the Parramatta Eels in this little moment that they're in at the moment, because they're winning and getting close to winning games at the moment, but for the past few weeks and particularly this year, they're second last on the ladder after just missing out on finals last year. It's been on a very, very quick decline from where they were 2-3 years ago when they were in the grand final against the Penrith Panthers, right? Obviously it would be frustrating for players to be in this sort of spot, to be in this scenario. And I can understand from a Moses, from a Dylan Brown perspective, even from a Gutho perspective, that this current situation where they're in right now, where their coach that they have, grown to respect and they've grown trust around as well, just gets sacked even after they've made finals continuously throughout the past few years. And after 1 or 2 unsuccessful years, get sacked from the club. And now they're, with a new coach, it sounds like they're not really getting along with at the moment. They've got a new coach they don't know, with a plan that they don't know yet. And they're just, a little bit inconfident with the plan for the future, right? I can understand the frustration and the confusion. And, there is going to be periods where they are, going to exercise these clauses or look to exercise these clauses because they just don't know the plan for the future. I'd be reassuring these guys, Brownie, Moses, Gutho, all of these star players you built your side around for the past few years, that this is still the place to be. That, the Parramatta Eels, they are going to go up from here. They are obviously going to turn things around. They're going to sign guys. They're going to go well over the next few years. And the people that don't want to be there can go. And they've got to reassure that these star players, that the Parramatta Eels, they are going to get better. And this is they're going to get out of this period that they're in right now. That needs to happen ASAP. Jason Ryles needs to sit down with all of these guys and reassure them that the future's looking up. Because at the moment, I can understand why, with such a quick decline over the past 2 years, there'd be frustrations there with these sort of guys with the current situation that they're in. So definitely needs to be a bit of reassurance with those top guys. I've heard multiple chats about Mitch Moses in talks with the Roosters. I don't know how 100% they are, but if he ends up going there, it'll be good for the Roosters. But for the Parramatta Eels, it's basically like that AJ Brimson example that I gave before, that theoretical example that I gave before. They'd pretty much lose the guy they've been building the side around for the past few years. They'd need to go ahead and look for another 7. And the worst part about that is that the guy that they had as the understudy to Mitchell Moses and Ethan Sanders, he's gone now as well. So he's gone to Canberra. Blaze he's going to Penrith. Obviously, Matt Arthur sounds like he's going to make a move to Newcastle. He's been released from the club effective immediately a few weeks ago. It looks like he's going to Newcastle or might already be at Newcastle. But yeah, look, I mean, very, very concerning. Obviously it will. It's going to be quite an ugly little period unless they reassure these sort of guys that it is looking up, that they sign some younger dudes to be the next ups to these vets at the moment. It looks like they're signing Bailey Simonson or re-signing Bailey Simonson soon. So that's a positive there. But they've just got to start reassuring these guys and getting these clauses out of these contracts going forward. And I think a lot of clubs around the league have got to follow in that footstep as well. I think that clauses need to be less and less common because you're going to get situations like this. I mean, only 2 years ago now, a year ago now, Dave Fifita was going to go to the Roosters because of clauses in his contract. Tino was looking to go back to the Melbourne Storm before obviously re-signing and locking in as the captain of the Gold Coast Titans. He was going to go back to the Melbourne Storm. It's very, very strong chat that he was going to leave the Gold Coast Titans because of clauses in his contract and because the club wasn't going well. We've seen this sort of thing happen. Literally, they announced the signing of Dave. They were going to announce the signing of Dave Fifita. Next minute, he's not going there anymore, and he re-signs with the Titans. Luckily for them, but that's how close it was going to be. The post template was made up, as far as I'm concerned. What I've heard from Roosters higher ups, the post was made to go out. That's how close it was to happening. And unfortunately, obviously, he went and stayed with the Gold Coast Titans. But, this is what clauses in contracts can do. They need to slowly come out of the game because if you make a handshake agreement to stay at a club, you need to follow through with that agreement and have faith in the club. Obviously, if it gets really bad, then I can understand why I'd want to get out of there. But, these clauses ruin clubs. They ruin clubs. And if Brown and Moses were to leave Parramatta tomorrow, that club would go on an almighty decline because both of the guys to replace both of those guys, they're gone. Penrith and obviously Canberra Raiders, Ethan Sanders and Blaze Talungi. Both of them are gone. So they really cannot lose Dylan Brown or Mitchell Moses. If I was Brownie in that situation, maybe I'd talk at getting my deal reduced. So maybe it's till 2027 or 2028 or 2029 rather than 2031 because that's a long deal. It is a long deal, and I can understand, when the club isn't going too well and having that long deal, it feels like you're trapped. It feels like you're locked in, right? I'd have that talks to maybe reduce that contract so he feels safer in the contract as well. Yeah, but player options and stuff like that, they've just got to go. And unless it's really bad, you've just got to stick it out. If you have a handshake agreement to stay at a club, you've got to stick it out. And look, I'm not a player, but I've heard many other players say the same thing as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about that one. Obviously, we talked about it a little bit already on the podcast, but it is a very awkward situation, and it could be the decision that either fixes or ruins the Parramatta Eels in terms of, as I said, if both of these guys are set to leave like we've seen in previous times with this Tino and Dave Fifita situation, the Gold Coast Titans. And now the last thing we were going to talk about, we just added it on to the end there. It was Corey Horsburgh. He looks to be signing with the Bulldogs. He met with the Bulldogs staff member at Canterbury Leagues Club today. So it looks like that deal is going to get signed. He obviously requested a release from the Raiders. They're looking to entertain that release. And obviously, since he's not in the first grade side at the moment, it makes sense that obviously that looks like there's a bit of conflict there. He'll go to the Dogs. He's already been at the Dogs before. If you guys can remember back to 2021 or 2022, he signed with the Dogs for a little bit on a loan. It looks like he will be going there. Obviously, they've got Noah Martin and the other Martin brother. His name escapes me. But they're both in there as well. They've got a lot of guys to bring through in terms of forwards. They've got a lot of forwards. They need to make space for some more outside backs and halves and stuff like that in their top 30 squad. So it does make sense that obviously Corey Horsburgh, these sort of guys, just to free up a bit of cap space, would be moving on. And I think Corey Horsburgh is exactly what the Dogs need there through the middle off the bench. A bigger body that is just all rough and guts. Can come on for 20, 25 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes in the game and it just go absolutely a-ham. I think that he would be unreal. So Corey Horsburgh, looks like that deal is set to be done by the end of the day, potentially over the next few days. Maybe there's a bit of a cooling off period, but I imagine that he'll go there potentially effective immediately, if not going into next season, but we'll have to wait and see. There you go. That is your news pod. Make sure to go ahead and subscribe to Big LEZ'S League. Become a part of the Big LEZ'S League community. All of the socials are in the description below, the Instagram, the TikTok, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Get around it. We'll see you guys in the next one.